In that video, the last one I did called the elephant, the flea in me, which was on learned helplessness. I left it. It basically was a description of the problem of limitations, bondage. The elephant not understanding its strength, that it can pull a stake out. The flea learning that it doesn't want to bang its head against an arbitrary ceiling. And these are both training techniques. People are trained this way. So I wasn't particularly happy with leaving it that way, because our whole society is full of problems and then solutions to them, whether it's weight gain, Weight Watchers. Apparently the weight industry is fabulously huge, and all kinds of other health things, different things people might have. Like I said, the motivational, how many people wake up depressed, say, oh, well, I need motivation. And so they go to motivational videos or self-help things, which are fabulously, when you're hooked into those things, they're feeding you. I've gone through that myself. I know I listened to this one Wayne Dyer tape series, like 12 tapes or whatever, Stephen Covey tape series. I listen to these things probably dozens of times because I have the time. I can sit down. I do architectural illustrations, or I have professionally. And so it gives you a lot of time just to listen to stuff, feed your head. And, so that was a great way for me to listen to it. Not everybody has that kind of a job or task or that kind of time that they can use where they just can kind of pump information into their head. In any case, it's entertaining. It's pleasant to hear somebody tell you about your limitations and how you can get over them. And as it's been pointed out by other people, sometimes people that love organizing things will convince people that hate organizing things and showing them that they have a problem, and then they sell them a system or program to learn how to organize things. Well, it's futile. It's absolutely futile, because that person doesn't want to organize things. Which reminds me of a story. I've got to tell you this story. It's an amazing thing. Again, I think this one was in the Denver Post. But anyway, so this guy that invented neuro-linguistic program, he's in a workshop. He's walking around the room, and this guy was, famously, I think he was accused of killing his wife or something like that. So this guy's wandering through the group, and he says, does anybody have anything they don't want to do? And this one guy said, you couldn't make me balance my checkbook. You couldn't make me do it. And the guy said, and the guy who's doing it, what's his name? Bandler, Richard Bandler. He's wandering around the room and he's going, I couldn't make you balance your checkbook. He said, well, that's pretty boring, right? And the guy says, no, nobody could make me do that. I mean, it's just, I'd rather, it makes me brain dead. I don't want to do it. All that kind of stuff. You can imagine the conversation. So Bandler turns around and he goes, I couldn't, you mean there's nothing I could do to get you to balance your checkbook? And the guy says, there's no way. I hate it too much. There's no way. So Bandler turns around and he's got a gun in his hand, and he's talk about a seminar. He's got this gun in his hand, and he starts kind of pointing it vaguely in the guy's direction. He's like, you mean there's nothing I could do to make you want to balance your checkbook? And the guy, he's sweating it out now, because he's thinking that Bandler, who's got a kind of an erratic personality, talented and brilliant maybe, but erratic maybe too, he's like wagging this gun at him, and the guy says, yeah, no, nobody can make me balance my checkbook. And he said this went on for like 10 minutes. The guy was relating the story. Bandler didn't relate the story. The guy's relating the story that went to the seminar. And so Bandler he would point at him, and he's pointing a pistol at the guy's face. He goes, you mean I couldn't make you want to balance your checkbook? And the guy's just sweating it out at this point, wondering if he's going to live through the seminar. And Bandler, finally Bandler says, he takes his gun, and he kind of wistfully, he puts it away, and he goes, that's too bad. I'm sorry to hear that. He goes away, and the guy says, he said he went home, and long story short, he loves to balance his checkbook. He said after that seminar, he now loves to balance his checkbook. So, what's the moral of the story? The moral of the story is, what, a gun can convince you of anything? No, that's not the moral of the story. The moral of the story is crisis. I think that's crisis. I was thinking about the last talk about what's with the elephant, well, or the flea, either one. If the flea, I'm thinking that if the flea landed on, let's say, a dog or something like that, and it's getting scratched, I doubt that it would remember the state-specific circumstances that it learned to only jump this high off the ground. And it would probably go back to its old leaping capacity. I'm just guessing that given the right crisis, which would be maybe a claw or some other issue with the flea, that it would learn to do some serious leaping again, at least somewhere back to its old capacities. And with the elephant, if it heard its baby elephant or something like that was threatened, I got a feeling it could pull a stake out of the ground. It's a crisis. So now this is the challenge, and this is the challenge with it. Also, I taught, I did a few seminars. They were kind of in-house things. I never got really that serious with it, but on drawing. And I was totally willing to do it. I was totally willing to get paid to do these things in the interest of inspiring young architects or old architects. Old dogs and young dogs can all learn new tricks. And so I was there to teach them the new trick of drawing, because I'm going to make it look inspiring. And who do you get to teach drawing? Some guy that knows how to draw, who has never had a problem drawing in his life. I've never had an issue with it. It's always been a piece of cake. You could hardly keep me off it. I would doodle all the time. That's my deal. So in some ways, it's ridiculous for me to teach people. Now, I can teach techniques of drawing. That's great. But I'm sort of like the worst person to get somebody to draw that doesn't really want to draw. How do you get somebody to do something? Even if you can convince them of how many brain cells it's going to help, all this junk about creativity, or about how it doesn't have to look good and it's going to help your brain and your sharpness and your marketability in terms of client communications, or whatever it is you want to drum up about the reasons, this is reasonable, the reasons for wanting to draw, the reasons for balancing your checkbook, the reasons for a flea to jump 2.5 feet when it's learned to jump 6 inches, or the reasons for the elephant. It's crisis. Now, I'm not sure about what crisis would get a person to want to draw. There's so many other ways to get engaged in your profession or whatever without drawing. But so that it's not really true all the time. It's not like you can use crisis, because it's the famous story, that AIDS is the best thing that ever happened to me. Like, oh my God. I have this, again, an ongoing prayer. Please let me be clever enough to learn some version of change and dynamic engagement with the possibility of life without having to contract a terminal illness. Anything but that. You know that you're going to be better off if you develop this skill, this talent, or you develop this love of life, this lust for the next morning, this instead of waking up and just going, oh, it's another one of these, you just jump out of bed and you go, I'm alive. It's like, what gets you there? Apparently for some people, terminal illness. That seems wrong to me. It seems wrong. So I'm going to say, and I can't tell you, I can't really give you a good example. Again, I'm like the guy. I'm like doing the workshop with the drawing. I don't know that I can give good, inspired direction on. But I'm going to suggest something. I'm going to suggest something though. And the good thing about these suggestions is that then, I'm forced to like, okay, well, you gave the suggestion, now walk your talk. So I do think that one thing that helps is this contact I touched on in the last talk, which is the spiritual friend, which is an inner state. Like, okay, let's go here. You got your brain, it's got two halves. You got two halves of brain. You got your left brain and your right brain, and the left brain connects up to your left hand and your right brain connects up to your right hand. There's a crossover. And so that we have within us two different nuances of how we view the world. Left brain, right brain. And in radical circumstances, I think there's a lady that's got a YouTube out that's quite fabulous, actually, I don't know, 10, 15 years old. I don't know when she did it, called, I think it's called Stroke of Insight or something, and I forget her name. Great one to watch. But she had a stroke on one side. So she has this massive bleeding apparently on the left side of her brain, hemorrhaging. And so the brain shut down. Her left brain shut down, and all she had left was her right brain. So she was having a full-blown spiritual experience, cosmic consciousness. Everything expanded out, this incredible sense of well-being. And because she was a brain scientist, she ends up going, wait a second, something's wrong here. Even though I'm perceiving this really a wonderful world of wholeness and possibility, where she was actually losing her ability to speak. She was losing her ability to just relate simple phrases. So she thought, this hemorrhaging or whatever's going on in my brain is going to lock me into 100% the right brain functioning, which means this cosmic consciousness, where there's no trouble and it's very peaceful, but that's where she's going to die. So she had to make phone calls and stuff to get, and using whatever remnant of her left brain was left. She talks about describing going through business cards and fishing for the medical offices or whatever, and then she's turning the card upside down and backwards trying to figure out which way letters go, because this right brain functioning has relegated all of that stuff, the files, the balancing your checkbook. It's relegated all that to the left brain, and this is left-right duality. Obviously, a left-hand person would switch everything I'm saying from left brain to right brain to left brain. And half of us has this cosmic thing that doesn't relate to verbs and social norms or any of that kind of stuff. And it's kind of values, artistic, holistic, all that kind of stuff. And the other side is, technical, scientific, verbal, all these kinds of things, artistic versus verbal, that kind of stuff. I'm going to say that if you go further than that, even within us, if you take that whole sort of complex of left-right paradigm within me, there's another paradigm that I have, which is me as a sense of the doer, me as a sense of someone engaged. I call it the egoic shell in the other one. And then there's something inside of that egoic shell. We make the mistake of thinking or assuming that the egoic shell is somehow animated by, I don't know, like electricity or something, and that electricity runs everything. And so that we don't relate to it. We relate to it like we would a wall socket, which is not at all. It's like you plug stuff into it. And again, another story, make it brief. I went to this sort of out-of-the-box thinking psychologist, and he used a video camera and asked me key questions. The idea was to isolate my so-called inner manager versus the other side, which is he was trying to get a visual cue on what my left brain literally looked like on my face versus my right brain literally on my face. So he asked me key questions addressed to, let's say, the left brain, which would be the creative, not the creative side, that would be the managerial side. And he asked critical questions of my right brain, which would be my creative side. And then when he reran the video for me, he put a mirror right down the middle of my face. And that's the way it works. So he created these facial composites, one for the left side and one for the right side. And I saw two radically different people. The one where he used my right brain, I looked haggard, I looked tired, I looked disoriented. And then on the other side, my left brain, which is my right hand functioning, my left brain, he made that the whole composite that he made. I looked at that person and it was like, what a jerk. I mean, these are the people I couldn't stand in high school. I mean, I just couldn't stand. These people are jerks. You know, I would say they're the worst form of, let's say, insurance salesman or used car salesman. You know, I don't trust this person worth anything. These are two people within me. The guy that is a manipulator and Machiavellian. He's shrewd. He's manipulative. And then the side that says, "Oh, what do you want me to do? All right, well, okay. I'll, you know, what do you think it'll take? 14 hours? Okay, sure, I'll do it. You know." And it's just this side. So you've got this servant aspect within yourself, often associated with what I'm going to say is the right brain, and that you've got the served aspect of yourself, which would be the elite aspect or the management team within a person, and they're in the left brain. And so you've got this left brain basically enslaving and abusing the right brain. And if you see the composite of this, it's actually striking. Now, we go through this, we go through our daily life and we don't really think about that being a striking difference, and we're actually quite schizophrenic within ourselves. And I guess where I'd like to go with this is that if you want to meet this spiritual friend, first of all, you have to be more in the spirit of recognizing, first of all, that the part of you, the part of me, the part of you that runs your life is actually dictating and issuing orders to an unknown, someone it never met, someone it really doesn't care about mostly, never took the time to get to know, never really looked out there and said, who's doing this stuff? So, and I give you an example. You hold up your hand and you give yourself an order. You say, you open or close your hand. I challenge you to identify strong, immediate causality between you wanting to move your hand and moving your hand. I'll guarantee you it's not possible, because your desire to move your hand is not moving your hand. What's moving your hand is this other entity. Call it an energy body, call it an etheric body, call it the soul, call it intelligence, call it whatever, but I'm going to call it the friend because it's a consciousness. It has its own world that it lives in. It has its own sort of requirements. And one requirement that it has, and this is the beautiful and painful part, one of the requirements is to please you. This aspect of me, it wants nothing more than to please me. That's all it really wants. And it doesn't like break out and rebel. You'll go through things that feel like a rebellion. When you mistreat this friend, when you mistreat it, it will surface as chronic illnesses, mistakes or accidents, where you've got a real breakdown in things, so that in your life, if you're having a breakdown of things, if you've got depression, you've got different kinds of things coming up, I would say chances are strong you're out of step. At least, to say the least, you're out of step with this friend, because really this other side is altruistic, holistic, spiritual, and I would say that it's more akin to, in the case of the right-handed person, it's more akin to the right brain, because there's that crossover. So, and the left brain is more akin to the part of you that's willing to give orders to that thing, to sit in the chair for 14 hours and create some good stuff. Because the one that accrues all the benefit is really coming out of the left brain, the non-creative brain. It's like, hey, look at what we got, especially in the case of someone that's an artist of any kind. And you know what? It's not just artists, it's anybody. Anybody who does anything. a creative, dynamic, beautiful part that really wants to do nothing but support your narrative. Often a stupid narrative, a pitiful, dumb narrative of absolutely image-driven, absolutely superficial. There's no substance to it whatsoever. And in order for me to, number one, let's say I'm the elephant and I'm tied off to this stake and I want to get away from this situation. First of all, you got to identify it as a situation. You know, and that's why I said crisis works, because in a crisis, you know, you pull on that thing, oh my God, how am I going to pull it out? Well, you know, because it's a crisis, the elephant can overcome the programming and rip the stake out of the ground. And in the case of us, the various limitations we have, if I view living my quasi-depressing, mediocre life in a certain way, if I view it as this is great, you know, well, you know, I'll get the gold watch or whatever it is, whatever form my gold watch takes. If I've got that sort of an idea about this stuff, then I'm never going to break free because I'm okay with my status quo. So I'm going to suggest that number one, the crisis has to come by an awakening to that I'm in a situation, and often that's indicated by moods and feelings and shortfall in a sense of vitality. There's a shortfall in my sense of vitality. I'd say that there's a possibility that I'm walking out of step with this friend, you know, the spiritual friend. Now, why do we want to tap into the spiritual friend? Because they've got all the resources. The spiritual friend has all the resources. And included in that resource is a complete irreverence for the limitations that I have imposed on myself. That's the critical piece. The spiritual friend, they have zero interest in me jumping to the top of a 30-story building, but at the same time, they have all of the inspiration and the inner energies for me to, let's say, jump to the metaphorical top of a 30-story building. So that'd be good. There's some stories with this and I'm going to tell it. In the Ramayana, Rama comes up to, he's looking for his wife, Sita. Okay, Sita has been kidnapped by the king Ravana, the evil king Ravana. He's over in Lanka. Rama is looking for him. They go through this long bunch of story of getting the animals to help and whatnot. A lot of symbolism, a lot of great stuff there. But Ram gets to the ocean, and he's got a whole army behind him. We're all going to go, and Rama's going to get his wife because Rama's all-powerful. You know, he's the incarnation of Vishnu, which would be the equivalent of like a Christ anointed one for us. So he's going to like go over there, watch Ram. He's going to kick Ravana's butt, so to speak. And he's going to jump over there. Well, what ends up happening is Ram doesn't know what to do. He gets to the water, and he doesn't know how to cross. He's got a whole army of apes and bears behind him, and they're all going, "Yeah, Ram, what's next? Hey, what's next?" And he's totally in the Ram ego at that point. So the only thing he knows how to do is to be powerful. So he says, okay, so the first thing he does is spiritual power. The first thing he does is he sits and he meditates for 3 days. Well, he cooks for 3 days and, totally one with whatever. And everyone, the apes and the bears and everybody are going, wow, this is no way to win a war. To meditate for 3 days. You're not going to kick anybody's rear end if you're just sitting on the beach, communing with your inner self. So Ram gets to the end of that time, and they show him, he glows like a ripe mango. It's India, and they have mangoes over there. So he glows like a ripe mango, and finally he stands up, and his brother Lakshman, he says, "See, look, I told you it was going to be a waste of time. You've just completely blown 3 days. Now, let's just go make fast work. I would threaten the ocean to death." And he says, "Lakshman, step aside. You watch me. I'm going to fry the ocean." So he pulls his arrow out. He's got his bow, and the thunder, the lightning, and the ocean is just cooking. He's gonna fry the ocean. That means life, that's sea life, whales, dolphins, little fishes, mangrove swamps where all the crabs and everything grows. In other words, this moron is going to obliterate life on earth. This God moron is going to obliterate life on earth to get over to save his wife. Well, the ocean comes out and it goes, wait a second, you got to stop. This isn't going to end well for either one of us. First of all, you made me insentient. I cannot answer what you want because I'm the ocean. Do you understand? I'm an element. But I will say this. You've got some guys in your group back there that have a curse on them. So then the story goes forward. These guys have a curse on them that anything that they touch will float. Well, end of story. Everybody understands, oh, all they got to do is touch a bunch of rocks and we'll build a bridge from here over to there. End of story. Happily ever after. But the point I want to point out is Rama in this story, he has to animate. He has to get to a crisis point. The meditation's not getting it. He has to reach crisis. And the crisis was absolute humiliation in front of his troops, complete failure in his task, and he would rather destroy life on earth than have those perfect temper tantrum. I'd say I don't want to go through these things, but I'm going to say that there's something instructive in that story about how to loosen up the inner cogs to defeat the mediocrity of a life that comes at us as an imposition, a constant imposition, a training ground, so that I'm constantly being trained to sit in my chair, trained to say my ABCs, trained. A lot of them are good things. I'm not criticizing. You got to be trained, right? It's the wild boy that was raised with the wolves. He didn't do that well. Just because he was raised with the wolves didn't mean he didn't do much. I think he ended up dying very, very young. True story. I'm not sure what it is. So I'm going to say that that's what we can do. The best thing that we can do is contact the servant aspect within ourselves. The one that's actually creating these things, and develop intensity to the extent of crisis. In a word, I guess let me get Buddhist here and say the crisis is this: you're going to die. That's the crisis. And then what will this life have availed you? And you won't recognize that it went away until that moment. So I guess, speaking personally as well, is to bring some more of that into my daily life as much as possible, so that if there is truly a stake to be pulled out of the ground or a jar lid to be conquered, then we have some resources that are actually there. It's not just a dead end. So thank you very much, and talk to you later. Bye.